This is a recording of Donald L. Irwin of 65 Oldsmobile Village, Sebring, Florida, 33870. Don's phone number is area code 813-385-4143. The recording was made at Don's home in Sebring by Jim Walkinshaw of the Oldsmobile History Center on January 25th, 1989. This is tape number 1 of 3 tapes. Don, if you'd just start with your name, address, and phone number, please.
I'm Donald L. Irwin. We live at 65 Oldsmobile Village, Sebring, Florida. The complete address is US 27 North, Sebring, 33870.
Okay. What's your phone number, Don?
Phone number is area 813-385-4143.
Okay, that's great. Now, if you would just take us back to when you started at Oldsmobile, Don.
My employment date at Oldsmobile was the 4th of
4-3.
the 4th month, 3rd day of 1932.
Okay.
And I started my work at Oldsmobile in the assembly line.
Right on the line.
Right on the line.
Okay.
When I talked with Mr. Miller after paying several visits to the employment office,
all right.
Naturally I wished to become a clerk, but there was no clerical work available.
All right.
Assembly line was available. So
Miller was the employment manager at that time?
Mr. Miller was the employment manager.
Where was that employment office?
The employment office was on Elm. The building was the corner of Townsend and Elm Street.
Okay.
And the employment office faced on the Elm side.
All right. The old administration building 60, that old administration.
That's right. In the basement.
Right.
We used to line up out there in the morning about 5:30, 5:45.
Really?
And we would stand in line until the doors would open and a few would be let in and most others wouldn't be. And then the next morning we were back there again.
Would they just send everybody else home? Is that?
Well, at that time, they only hired a very few at a time. And of course, we people that were standing out there became acquainted with each other. And the morning that I was actually let in and was employed, I didn't show up that morning. I thought, well, I've been there so many times that I'll just wait a while. So it probably was 8 o'clock before I got there. And when I got there, the fellow said, "They've been calling your name. They've been calling your name."
Oh, my goodness.
So I sort of got in right away quick. And of course, Mr. Miller said, "I thought that you was anxious to go to work."
Well, now that was right in the middle of the Depression, sort of, wasn't it?
It was still in the Depression.
Yeah, I'm surprised they were even hiring anybody.
Well, they were hiring, as I say, very few at a time. And they were just beginning to start to produce.
Okay.
And after getting into the plant and going to work on the line,
all right,
you would go to work in the morning at the hour of work, which as I recall was 7 o'clock.
Okay.
There was times that the supervision would meet you at the time clock and say, "Don't punch in.
Really?
Just sit down here in the lunchroom and wait. We'll call you." Very, very seldom were you sent home, but you were sent home at times.
Huh.
I am absolutely unable to explain just exactly the procedure because I didn't know just how they communicated in regards to shall we produce today or shall we not. And there was excuses given to us that I don't think always were just exactly right, but anyway, that was the reason that we went home. I mean, we never knew whether we were going to work 4 hours or 6 hours or 2 hours or just what we were going to work. And this went on in 32 and No, 34. Did I say 32?
Yeah,
I'm
you
sorry.
did, yeah,
And it was 1934
when you came.
when I first
All
came.
right, all right.
And it went on in 34 and 35, and then 36, things begin to pick up a little bit.
Okay. What were you doing? What was your task, Don?
My first work, I was working at a little riveting machine. After they laid the tailpipe and the mufflers and exhaust and like that into the frame,
Yeah.
there was a metal clamp or arm that would fasten around the pipe and then onto the frame. And where it fastened onto the frame, there was a pad
Mm-hmm.
that was riveted to this little metal arm
Okay.
to keep from rattling.
All right.
And that was the way that the tailpipe was held onto the frame of the car, and that pad eliminated any noise that would be made if it was all metal.
And you had to rivet that
And
thing on
I
the-
had to rivet that pad onto that little arm. It was about 8, 9 inches long.
Uh-huh. And so you would, those were cold, not hot rivets?
No, those were cold rivets.
Cold rivets,
And these were stacked into what we called tote pans
Mm-hmm.
and set over on the bench so that the ones that were working on the line could use them to fasten onto the frame and onto the tailpipe.
Oh, yeah.
And of course, being a greenhorn as I was over there riveting these as fast as I could and filling up the tote pans. And when they'd get one or two ahead, they'd put them underneath the benches. Then they'd tell me they were short. I think there were times that I was doing enough for both shifts, but that's one of the things that they would pick on people about. You know, we always had to have our fun too, along with our work.
Sure.
I had that job for, well, for the balance of that year and into the next year.
Do you remember what your wage was when you hired?
49 cents an hour.
49 cents.
And we were on what they called, well, they had a name for it. You never knew whether you were going to get a little more, because if everything went smooth on the line and there was no lost time and like that, you got a little bonus.
Oh, okay. Like piecework, sort of.
Well, a little bit on that order, but not called that.
But you never went below the 49 cents.
No.
Okay.
That was your base. That was your base.
Do you remember how fast the line went at that time? Did it have a speed that you can remember?
Well, as I recall, because of the fact that they were just nicely getting underway, and then they were always adding on green help that never worked on an assembly line.
Sure.
I think it was running around 32 an hour.
32 vehicles an hour.
Mm-hmm.
And that assembly line, Don, was located where?
Well, it was the frame line that I was on was just inside of Oldsmobile's assembly territory, outside of the Fisher Body area. The Fisher Body run right along Olds Avenue.
Okay. Up in building 26, that must have been, that old 26.
That was the old Fisher Body plant.
All right.
And where I was on the first floor of the frame line, just outside of the Fisher Body building.
All right. So that would have been you must have been in building 20 then. What would have been called building 20?
Yes, I think so. Mm-hmm.
Okay. And then the line came down and went south along the wall there inside the building.
Mm-hmm.
Went all the way to the river almost.
Well, yes. Of course, it was entirely different in 34 and 35. Well, in fact, it was entirely different up until the war started and the war work started than it was afterward. They made a lot of changes when they started up after the war. They made a tremendous amount of changes, but
we'll get there in a minute. Yeah. Okay. So you were down there then on the line for a couple of years, or a year or so, riveting.
Yes, and then from that I went to what they call step hangers. The step hanger was fastened to the frames to hold the fenders up.
All right. That was like a big bracket that stuck out.
Right. There was three on each side of the frame. I worked on one side and someone else on the other side, and I had this swinging air riveting machine that you had to swing around and rivet those step hangers onto the frame.
So that was, they must have riveted most things to the frame rather than bolt, didn't they? Apparently.
There was, I don't know how many operations were rivets, but I do know the step hangers were riveted in that first.
Yeah. And the riveting machines, were they air operated?
Those for the step hangers were air operated, yes.
How about the little one that you were doing for the muffler, the tailpipe bracket?
That was a foot operation.
Okay. And was it all mechanical down? I mean, the harder you push, the harder it riveted, or was it an air cylinder or something?
It was an air cylinder, and as I recall now, probably just a couple of.
Yeah. Okay. Little cylinders that went stand. Okay. Was the big riveter for the step hangers? Was that supported overhead so that you didn't have to carry the weight of it?
Right. That was suspended from the ceiling on a coil spring like.
Okay, like a balancer or something.
So that you could maneuver it freely. And that was the secret of the thing. You had, after you became accustomed to it, it was just almost like automatic, but you'd hit the right spot all the time. And it was one of those operations that if you happen to miss a day and they put someone else on there, why it looked like it was difficult. But when you were doing it constantly, day after day and day after day, why it was just like any other. It was a simple operation.
What was the frame sitting on or traveling on at that time? At that part of the line?
Well, when the frame was first put on, it was put on like on skid.
All right.
And then it went so far in that way until the rear housing was set on, and the springs was attached, and then it was on a conveyor after those operations. Where I was actually working on it, it was still on a more of a slide affair.
Did you have to move it from station to station?
No. There was something that worked through the center, carry it on down.
Slid it along.
Okay. And then when they got it on beyond the springs and that part, why it could be. It was tipped over and so it was still on a frame line. It was swung over.
All right. Okay. Then they put wheels on it eventually and set it down.
The wheels and the motor, that sort of thing.
Okay.
My boss that I had when I first went to work at Oldsmobile was Glenn Mitchell.
Glenn Mitchell. Okay, he was the foreman.
He was the foreman.
All right.
And when I was put on the step hangers with the riveting machine, that area in there was Archie Frazier.
Okay.
And another one of the foremen in that area was Fred Hauser. I think his son worked up in the administration.
George Hauser.
George Hauser, the big, tall, slender fellow. His dad was out there on the assembly line at one time.
How did those guys, Don, of that era manage their employees? How did they handle people?
Well, as far as the supervision was concerned, they were very understanding and very, very friendly with the employees. As I recall, you didn't have the time for restrooms and like that they did later after the union came in. you had to get relief, and there wasn't always a relief man available when you needed one, but you had to just control yourself and wait until there was a relief that would come. Your restrooms when I first hired into Oldsmobile were anything but what you'd call good. There was not always toilet paper there, and there wasn't always the paper towels there.
Okay.
We just made the best of these things.
Did you have a cafeteria or that kind of thing to eat lunch in?
No, not at the time when I first went to work there, at least not in our area.
What did people do for lunch?
Carried their own lunch buckets.
And just kind of sat along the line?
We know, well, you could do that, or they had, in the basement, they had tables set up.
All right.
And you could go down, and in fact, that was where you'd start come in the morning to punch the clock, and that's where you were told that either you did go to work or you didn't go to work.
Oh, okay. So that was all in the basement of that.
And you would return there for eating your lunch, or you could. A lot of the fellows would just sit there on the benches around their work and eat. In fact, even back in those days, a lot of the fellows would take their lunches where they could eat before the lunch period came, because they had to play cards during the lunch period.
So that was an activity during lunch hour in those days too.
That was half hour of fun.
What did they play?
I think euchre mostly.
Okay.
Anything that was real fast.
Yeah. Did you guys come up what I'll call that big double set of stairs that were kind of in the middle of building 20 there? Is that where you came up in the basement?
Right.
Oh, yeah. Right. All right.
Yeah, those stairs carried you up into the frame assembly area, and they also led you to the axle plant.
Okay.
Area.
Yeah. Okay. Did you get out of the axle plant at all, Don?
I worked in the assembly line for 34, 35, 36.
Okay.
And when I would come back from the layoff in 36, I worked in the engine plant.
Oh, okay. You moved out to the engine plant then.
And I worked for Mr. Miller in the engine plant. And my work in the engine plant was with a little two-wheel hand truck and the block four.
All right.
Whenever they miscued and one was damaged, well, that was dropped off the sliding roller conveyor.
Yeah.
And I was to wheel it either to a repair department, or if it was beyond repair, wheel it to an area where they were taken on out and dumped in the scrap pit.
Oh, I'll be darned. That was all done with a little hand truck, a push truck.
And if I parked my little truck and went to the restroom, when I came back, my truck was never where I parked it. They would start shoving that little truck underneath the roller conveyors and like that, and it would be anywhere in the motor plant by the time I caught up with it.
On purpose to hide it.
Oh, yes. That was a little of the humor in that division. A
little of the game. Yeah. Okay.
I probably spent a quarter of my time looking for my truck. And I worked in the motor plant that year and the following year.
Where was that in building 28? Do you remember the building that?
The motor plant where I worked was in the same area where the rocket engine finally.
Okay, so that was in like the 36 and 38 building.
That area there, yes.
Next to building 40. Okay. What were they making there then, Don? They were making blocks because you were working on the block line.
6 and 8 cylinders.
6 and 8 cylinders. Okay. Were they making crankshafts and pistons and rods and all of those kinds of things?
Back in those days, the operations were all single operations. There was no multiple operations at those time. They hadn't come out with these new.
The transfer machines didn't exist. No,
they didn't exist at all. All operations were individual operations.
Okay.
And then the method of handling them was entirely different. Your crankshafts would be on hooks and then dropped into your your machine,
Okay.
and then you'd be raised up out of there with a hook and swung to the next operation.
All right.
Your blocks would, like where I was working, the blocks would be on a roller conveyor
Oh, all right.
from one operation to the next
Well, a
operation.
man would actually push it from
Right,
operation to
right.
operation.
That's right.
You remember the block hones where they honed the cylinders?
Yes, but not where I can discuss it really.
Okay. Just curious if they did them all at once or one cylinder at a time.
As I remember, it was a single, but I'm not sure.
All right.
I
That's
would
all
know.
right. That's okay.
There might have been a multiple.
Yeah. Yeah. Where was the engine assembly line? Do you remember where that was?
It was in that area, but I don't know. Just
All right.
I guess I was interested in my little two-wheel truck and
Yeah. How was were the working conditions in the engine plant significantly different than they were in the assembly plant, Don?
Well, of course, my job that I had was definitely different because I wasn't tied to any time deal or any speed deal or anything. You weren't you weren't faced with the idea that there's one right behind the other all the time, so forth and so on. When you was on that assembly line, you had to finish your operation on a time deal and be ready for the next one, and ready for the next one, and ready for the next one. Where in the motor plant, it was definitely a production basis, but it was more to the point that everything had to be done perfectly, and it wasn't as push, and hurry all the time as it was in the assembly line.
How about the cleanliness and the employee facilities and those kinds of things? Was there anything different between those two?
They had started to improve when I was in the engine plant.
All right.
Again, I will have to say that it was the union that corrected a lot of these things.
That happened somewhere in there too, didn't it? The union.
About 36.
Yeah, the formation of the union.
Right.
What happened at the plant during that time?
In what way? What
did we went out on strike? Did we? How did the employees?
I don't think that we had the labor trouble at all like they did in Flint.
Okay.
Flint seemed to be what I would call the guinea pig on that strike thing at that time.
Okay.
But ours was more of a smooth. Oldsmobile supervision up front, and then right on back to production was much more understanding and much more friendly than it was in Flint.
I see.
And then again, perhaps the early employees were more congenial and like that. My memory of my hourly work wherever I was that it was very friendly, very congenial. There was always this feeling in your mind: are we going to work 6 months? We're going to work 3 months? We're going to work a 40-hour week, or are we going to work a 34-hour week? And you were always catching up. As far as finances are concerned, you never was ahead.
Yeah, and you really never knew how long the production run was going to last.
No. No, this continued that way right through 39.
It did. Now, you mentioned a layoff in there someplace. Where was that, Don?
Well, each and every year.
Each and every year you had a layoff?
Right, each and every year. And there again, you never really knew, as far as the workers was concerned, just when that was going to be. It definitely was regulated according to the sales and according to the orders, and also, I suppose, to a certain extent, a supply on hand, Even then, they had to buy ahead.
Yes. Did those layoffs tend to occur at one particular place in the year, or was it just kind of random?
Well, it was the layoffs ordinarily were just through the summer months.
Okay.
The layoff that we got in 1939, I was still at the motor plant
All right.
when this happened, but the layoff in 39 took place, as I remember, about March,
Oh,
and we didn't get called back to work until in October.
wow. Long time
It
then.
was a long one.
Mm-hmm.
That was the year that I practically decided not to go back to work at Oldsmobile.
Oh, yeah. I can imagine a lot of people felt that way if they're off that long.
But with a little persuasion on the part of some of my friends, I went back.
Uh-huh. Did you stay in the engine plant doing the block thing, or did you change jobs as
No,
pilot?
my work at the engine plant was just that one job for the
All right.
time I was
The
there.
whole time? Uh-huh.
And when I came back to work after the long layoff in 39, I went to work in the axle plant.
Oh, all right. That would have been up in Building 21 in that area?
I worked for Harry Greenhole, who was under Joe French.
All right.
And my work there was on the housing line, what we called the banjo. I operated the machine that cut the flash out of the center of the banjo part.
After it was welded together?
After it was welded together,
Oh,
well,
right.
there was this flash that was left, and then they slipped it onto this machine where I was, and the cutters came out from each side and cut the flash off from the welders.
Oh, yeah. Okay. That was on the inside of the housing.
Right,
Mm-hmm.
right. And I worked on that for some time. I don't recall how long. And then I worked on well, let's see. I worked on another machine there in the axle plant. I've got to stop and think here just a second.
It's okay.
I think it was called a spindle, but I'm not sure of that. Anyway, it was the part that the drum and the wheel would go on to.
Mm.
And I worked onto a machine that had cutters that cut the spindle part and smoothed it.
Mm-hmm.
It's not as fresh in my mind as it should be.
Well, it was only a couple of years ago.
But anyway, I had 2 or 3 operations, different operations in the axle plant, and my affiliation there with Harry Greeno and Joe French and like that was very good.
Was the axle housing was that hand welded when they welded those 2 pieces together, the banjos, or do you remember whether that was a mechanical thing?
No, that was a mechanical.
Okay. So we had automatic, so to speak, welders at that time.
That was as the years went by, these operations were improved, and the new methods came into the picture.
Sure.
While I was working there in the axle plant, one of the so-called humorous things that happened to me, of which I didn't think it was humorous myself, but I happened to have wore what I considered at that time to be a good hat to work.
Okay.
And in so doing, why I hung this hat up on one of the upright posts right close to my operation that I was doing. Before the noon hour came, there was a lot of laughing going on, and I couldn't figure out what it was all about, but I looked up and my hat was gone.
Uh-oh.
I discovered that they'd hung it on a pin that went around through the paint room where they were painting the housings, and my hat was just about as hard as these hats that they use on a trumpet barrel. And probably by the time I found the hat, it had about 35, 40 coats of paint on it.
Oh, my Lord.
But it furnished quite a few of the employees with a good chuckle, and
I can imagine, yeah.
it made my blood boil for a little while. But anyway, those things would happen.
Did everybody wear a hat generally in the plant?
No, I generally didn't. But that certain day, and for what reason, I don't know whether I was going to stop somewhere on my way home from work or what. But anyway, I wore a hat.
Yeah.
I don't think I ever wore a hat after that, as long as I was on, on production.
That was the end of the hat.
Right. There used to be things that would go on that would add a little spice. There was always someone bringing eggs in to
fresh eggs.
Fresh eggs. And sometimes these eggs would be taken home in the same condition that they were brought in, and sometimes they would go into a tank and they would be hard boiled before they went home. And they used to bring in live ducks and rabbits, not into the plant.
Oh, okay.
But in with them in a cage or not in their car, and then they'd raffle them off.
Oh my goodness!
I won a couple of ducks one time before I went out for lunch, and happened to be on payday when they do this, ordinarily. And I didn't have the buck or buck and a half to pay for my chances that I took. When I got back from my lunch, they'd already been sold to somebody else, and I made half $1 off my wager that I made.
And didn't do anything.
And I never seen them. Excuse me, sir. There were other little things that happened that I can recall that made work a little easier and a little more interesting. And they would even raffle off a pig occasionally.
Wow, a whole pig,
a live pig.
Oh my goodness! Where did they carry all these things, in the back of their car?
There was the farmers usually had a pickup truck or something, and they'd bring them in a cage, and once in a while you would find one of them that would bring one in that was already killed.
Yeah.
But most always this would be live.
Yeah.
And then another little incidents that I recall, they always check your lunch buckets on your way out the gate.
Okay.
And one of the fellows that worked quite close to me was sent back down to the plant protection office because they found 2 light bulbs in his dinner pail.
Uh-oh.
And he didn't know what was in there.
Somebody had planted them, huh?
But they were of no value.
Oh.
They had been used, but someone thought it was humorous, and they put them in his lunch pail. And of course, the officer at the gate didn't know that they were used, and sent him back down to plant protection. And when they come to check them out, why they were
burned out.
So there was things that went on like that just kind of added a little spice to work. You had to have those things go on when you were on production.
Yeah.
It couldn't be. It couldn't be all serious all the time. That made time go faster.
In that time frame, Don, did you work any overtime at all, or what was a normal work day?
Normal work day was 8 hours.
All right.
I don't recall of any overtime.
All right.
Any overtime at all. No, I just don't recall of any overtime. I know that. I know we worked a full 8-hour week, and I'm using the year of 39 when we went back after a long strike. My paycheck never reached the $40.
It didn't
for a full week.
Yeah.
We were making more than the 49 cents for that time, but I don't remember exactly what our hourly rate was at that time, but. We never took a check home with $40. Never did.
Now, would that have been in those days considered to be a pretty good wage as far as wage earners in the Lansing area were making?
Well, yes, I would say, because just using myself for an example, if you could work week after week and week after week with a $35 or $36 check,
Yeah.
you could make out all right.
Uh-huh.
But you just didn't do that.
Yeah.
You'd work maybe 6 months, maybe 7 months, maybe 8 months, and before you got back to work again,
Yeah.
you of course in 39 the checks started coming in when you were out of work. What was
Oh, the unemployment.
unemployment?
All right.
That started in 39,
Okay.
which helped tremendously.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But that was the first year that the unemployment checks came.
Prior to that, when you were off for these several months in a row, it was you had to live on your savings or
That's
whatever.
right, or borrow.
Mm-hmm.
There was a lot of borrowing done.
There was. Okay.
There was 2 or 3 finance places in Lansing that knew me quite well.
Okay. Well, now, how long did you stay in the axle plant then?
I worked in the axle plant until the beginning of 41. And one evening, I don't know just what time it was. It was after I got home from work.
Mm-hmm.
The phone rang, and Dorothy called me at the phone. It was Harold McFarland from the employment office. He said, "Don, we got a new job for you if you're interested." And he told me it was with Brian Athey in the tool room. And definitely I was interested.
Mm-hmm.
So I went over and had an interview with Brian Athey.
Okay.
It was when things began to look pretty bad for the country.
The war was approaching.
And they knew there in the tool room that work would be such that they needed to expand in the help-wise and such as that.
Okay.
And this work that Brian had for me was in the office, writing manifests for the steel that was to be used on the various jobs on the bench floor.
All right.
And it was something that I actually would have known nothing about. And that's what he told me he wanted, was someone that didn't know anything about it so that he could break them in the way he wished to break them in.
All right.
And it was taking these blueprints that came to the tool room from the engineering department for the various work to be done there.
Mm-hmm.
And the work that I was to do was to study these blueprints and figure out the amount of material that was needed to be cut in the steel room.
Okay.
To do this certain job.
All right.
And it was something that took me quite a while to familiarize myself with the different steels and then the different amounts.
Had you ever had print reading or drawing reading or that sort of thing?
Just in high school.
All right.
And then manual training.
Mm-hmm.
But I finally made it. I went to his office one day and told him I was going to quit.
Really?
I didn't think I could handle it because it was driving me crazy.
Yeah.
And his answer to me was, "Is anyone bothering you?" I said, "No, sir." He said, "Well, if no one is bothering you, you just go back, relax, and start right in again. It'll all come to you."
Mm-hmm.
Well, after that talk with him like that and all, it just took the pressure and the load right off from me.
Yeah.
And it just seemed like things were so much easier. And it comes so easy after that. That became very, very pleasant work. And
where were you in building 40 at that time,
On
Don?
building 40.
All right.
And I made myself known with the Ray Springer, who had charge of the heat treat and like
Okay.
that. Also made myself known with the boys down in the steel room so that we could communicate with each other and so forth and so on. And there was a time that I would make a mistake and have something cut that wasn't proper, or have a little too much cut, and so forth and so on. And Ray Springer always had a little special place to store these things. And there was a time later on when we would need this certain steel that I had cut that wasn't able to be used at the time that it was done. But he'd lay it to one side, and then when time came, we never threw anything away. It was always used. And I did that for 41 and 42, 43.
Okay. Did that change when the war happened? Any of that activity?
It continually changed. And then along with this work that I had, when the war really happened, and we were strictly on war work, the two-room people were unable to buy the necessary equipment that they had to have for their bench work and that sort of thing. So Red Cherry would order whatever was needed. The men in the two-room would place their order with me, and I would take these orders from the two-room office over to Red Cherry.
Now, Red was over in personnel at that time?
Personnel.
Okay.
I'd take them over to Red Cherry and turn them over to his secretary twice each week. And the orders would be placed. And then when the orders came in, ordinarily when I would take an order over, I was able to pick some up that had already previously been ordered and return these tools back to the tool room and deliver them to the employee that had ordered. So I had these two things to do all during that period of time.
Well, then things were somewhat difficult to get a hold of then, apparently.
Definitely so. And you had to have government forms and explain it was government work and this, that.
And Red apparently was handling all of that, the paperwork side of the thing?
But the paperwork side, as far as placing the orders, he handled that, yes. Or his girl
was, Okay.
So that work I continued until into 44.
Okay.
And Brian Athey had a.
See, Brian Athey was was he the
supervisor of the tool room?
Supervisor of the, what kind of guy was Brian Athey? Because I don't know much about him.
Brian was a very, very, very fine man. He worked under Coleman.
All right. John Coleman.
John Coleman. And at the time that I was first hired into the tool room, Brian's office was downstairs in the tool room.
All right.
But as work picked up and they had to maneuver and change the areas and this and that downstairs, while his office was moved upstairs, right next to Coleman's office.
Oh, okay.
And he was a very, very nice gentleman to work for.
How did he work with his people? Did he have meetings, or what was his approach?
Well, of course, there in that respect, he had work around the clock, and therefore he had supervision around the clock.
Yes.
And he would have meetings of the supervisory capacity of the tool room periodically, of which I never was in.
Oh, you never had to go to those?
No. Okay. No. But my work was such that it was strictly, as I told, working on these jobs as they would come in, and getting the material ready. So when I carried the jobs down to the bench floor, the orders had already been placed for the steel to be cut.
Sure.
And then the job number had been placed with that order for the steel to be cut. And then the worker on the bench floor could go right to the crib and get the steel.
Get his material that he
Right.
needed.
Right.
And your office was downstairs in 40.
Right downstairs.
Was all of the first floor 40 tool room at that time?
Oh, well, it was all tool room and things connected with the tool room. Your steel room,
Yeah.
your heat treat,
Yes.
and all of those things were at the back end.
All right.
And all of the front part and the side part was all your bench floor and your different operations and
your lathes and your milling machines and those things.
Right. Right.
All right. Was the center in building 40 at that time, or was it open up to the second floor?
So there was a stairway to the second floor.
Okay. So you couldn't look up and see the second floor from the first floor at that time?
No, not
that had filled in.
Yeah.
All right.
I climbed those stairs quite a few times.
I can imagine you did it.
Go to Mr. Coleman's office or Mr. Athey's office.
Did you deal with John Coleman much?
My first dealings with John Coleman was when Mr. Athey had a clerk working for him that I don't know exactly how this started, but there was a feeling between Brian's clerk and myself.
All right.
And I don't remember just exactly how that feeling started, but anyway, the feeling was so that he convinced Mr. Athey that I guess it would be fun to write a reprimand on me.
Oh, really?
So he wrote a reprimand and they presented it to me. And made me very, very unhappy.
I can imagine it was.
They had me going to the cafeteria during working hours and sitting up there drinking Cokes and punching somebody else's time clock. And
oh my Lord.
I mean, they really fixed it up.
Huh.
So I just left my desk and walked over to see Harold McFarland.
Yeah. I
knew Mac quite well.
Yeah.
He sat there at his desk and he read this all the way through. Never looked up and reread it. Never said a word to me. He rang Brian's number.
Uh-oh.
He said, Mr. Athey, I've got Don Irwin sitting here across from me, and he's got a reprimand. He says that he could not have worked long enough to commit all of the various crimes that are on this reprimand. And of course, I merely am saying what I think Mr. Athey said from what Mr. McFarland told me. Mr. Athey says, oh, he wasn't supposed to bring that over to you. We were just trying to scare him.
This was a joke.
And Mr. McFarland says, you certainly have scared him. He says, but it isn't any joke. It isn't funny.
Yeah.
He says, this is serious. He says, it should never have been written. And he says, if you have a copy of it, destroy it.
Mm-hmm.
Then he said to me, you go back to work. But he says, there's no use in you staying in that department. But he says, you won't be happy.
Yeah.
And I don't think that you will get along with conditions as they are.
Yeah.
But he says, I'll contact you. And I don't recall just how long it was. It was just a very, very short time that he contacted me, and he asked me to go upstairs and see Mr. Campbell in Methods Engineering.
All right.
So I went upstairs and had a nice long talk with Walter Campbell and went to work in Methods Engineering.
Okay. That was in 44. 44. Okay. Mm-hmm. The war must have been just about over then.
Well, there was things that indicated, but nothing sure.
Yeah. Okay.
And the way it all turned out for me, it was a blessing.
Uh-huh.
And it started me on the road to salary.
Okay, because all this time you've been an hourly person.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
All right. So what did Walt have you doing?
Methods Engineering was figuring out short cuts to do various operations, means of moving certain operations of work in the plant at various uh, various areas, various sections. That was figuring out how to save time.
All right.
A new way,
Okay.
a new method of doing this,
All
a
right.
new a new way of handling a part from one operation to the next, shortcuts, so forth and so on.
All right.
And of course, we did this on war operations, but we were very soon into the changeover and designing slides and all that sort of thing.
Okay.
And of course, even yet at that time, a lot of things were being done with wood and sheet metal. We hadn't got into the real modern fancy stuff yet. And it was very interesting work.
Who else was in the department with you then, Don? Do you remember any of the other guys?
Oh, yes. Hold on a second. In the department with me at that time was Bud Cedarquist, Bob Nesbitt, Lawrence Danford. Dave Cheney was our direct uh, instructor and boss.
Okay.
Emil Johnson, Dick Hines, William Eisenhower, Otto Walters, Bill Bennett, Bill Carver, Glenn Willoughby, Ken Gathrow, Wayne Lounger, Lyle Tanner, Louis Robbins, and Chuck Armitage.
Charlie Armitage. How about that? Okay.
They were all in this department. I was the junior member.
All right. And that picture that you're reading all that off of was taken at that time, huh?
1944.
All right. Oh yeah, there's Chuck Armitage right there. Yeah. How about that?
Chuck Armitage happened to have been in my brother's class at General Motors Institute.
Okay.
And my brother told me at one time that Chuck Armitage and Bob Cook would be two of the students that he had that would go places in Oldsmobile.
Interesting.
And they did.
Yes, good prediction. Yeah.
But
now all of these guys, Don, you resided all up there in 40, right, in the second floor.
Right.
All right.
We didn't have desks. We had a drawing board table.
Okay.
And this drawing board table could be flat, or it could be on a 45-degree angle or 25-degree angle.
Okay.
But our drawing board was our desk.
All right. In case you had to make a sketch or a picture or something, you could stand it up.
And and the bottom part of that had drawers for our equipment.
All right. Was this the first time that this methods organization had been formed, or maybe you wouldn't know that?
Well, that methods department was in operation, I would say, at least three years or more before I got
before you got there. All right.
And it continued, of course, after I left there.
Yeah.
I worked in methods until the boys started to come home.
Okay.
And as the boys came home, the ones that had the experience and the knowledge were placed on these jobs.
All right.
And I was moved into the traffic department.
All right. So that was your transition to the traffic department.
Right.
Were you on salary at this juncture?
Yes.
Okay.
And of course, and being in methods as I was, I had made various contacts with various departments in the plant with this work. And one of the contacts that I had made, which was very good, was with Earl Cunningham.
Who was
the superintendent of the warehouse out in Building 34, out by the Logan Street Bridge.
All right.
And of course, at the time that
32.
32 was it? Okay.
32 or 75 out by the Logan Street Bridge.
75, I think.
Okay. All right.
during the war, and when I had the contacts with him, the work that they were doing out there at that time was all the woodwork, like making the gun boxes,
The shipping containers?
right,
Uh-huh.
and the cradles and all that sort of thing.
Okay.
And I had many contacts with the boys out there to do work for us,
Okay.
and that we had in the Methodist department.
Uh-huh.
So I became very well acquainted with Mr. Cunningham, and when these changes were made, well, I was fortunate to be transferred into that area.
Did you, Don, get out into the plant much in the methods assignment? Where you would have seen what was going on out there?
Oh, yes.
Well, can you remember the kinds of things we were making during the war?
Well, we were making shells, the casing for shells.
All right.
And we had this gun tube that we were making.
All right.
And we made it to the point where we had the testing room down underground.
All right.
Between Elm Street and the engineering building where the parking lot is.
All right.
They had an underground testing room down there.
Okay. Did you get down in that?
No.
Okay.
My work didn't take me down in that at all.
All right.
That was the two main things. Was that
right.
was those shell casings and the gun.
Do you remember where the shell casings were made? What part of the plant?
No.
Okay.
Sorry.
That's all right.
I ran into Bill Mahoney one time when I was working in the tool room. I hadn't been transferred upstairs yet at that time. And I was making a trip across the plant. I don't know just where, but anyway, I was out in the open. Bill came along and he stopped. He said, "Don, come here a minute." I walked over to his car. He says, "Never walk around this plant without a clipboard or something in your hand." He says, "Just let me clue you in." He says, "You look a lot more important when you're carrying something around with you than you do when you're just walking around without anything." He said, "You look like you're lost or something." I never forgot that. Of course, when I went into the methods engineering department, I was always carrying a clipboard or blueprints or something. But I remembered his telling me, never walk around the plant empty-handed. Always have something in your hand.
Did Bill know most of the folks at the plant?
Oh, yes. Yes. Now, I think as far as knowing people in the plant, Mr. Miller was number one.
All right.
He had a very, very wonderful knack of knowing people, and if he hired you and he seen you 3 or 4 years afterwards, he'd call you by name.
Isn't that interesting?
He was very good.
Yeah.
And I would say Bill was number two on that. Bill knew people.
Yeah.
He wanted to know people.
He did.
And he wanted people to know Bill.
Okay. So Bill would spend some time out in the shop, apparently.
Yes, he was around. Mr. Skinner was the one also that would always go through the plant. He didn't make his little cubby hole up there his private quarters. He made trips through the plant.
So would you see him like out in the tool room and wandering around? And
you'd have to see him anywhere.
Is that right?
Right. In fact, the first time I ever seen him to know who he was, I didn't know who he was. He came into the tool room office and he wanted to see someone there.
Yeah.
And if I had have known it was Mr. Skinner, I would have probably been much more aggressive and much more willing to help.
Yeah.
Than I appeared to be. And after he left the tool room, Bill Fuller, who was also a clerk during the tool room, said to me, "Do you know who you were talking to?" And I said, "No, I don't." He said, "That was Mr. Skinner." And that was my first time of ever having a contact with him personally.
Yeah.
I made sure from then on that I knew who Mr. Skinner was whenever I seen him.
Yeah.
But he was a wonderful person.
Was he?
He was a grand person. When he would when he would attend our golf outings and like that, and they would ask him to make a little speech of some sort, he never would. He'd merely say, "We're all here for a good time. We're out here to enjoy ourselves. You're not out here to listen to me." That would be about as far as he would go, as far as making a talk or anything. He was great.
Oh, that's neat. That's great.
Yeah.
Well, okay, so now you moved over into the traffic department. This is a recording of Donald L. Irwin of Sebring, Florida. The recording was made by Jim Walkinshaw of the Oldsmobile History Center on January 25th, 1989. This is tape number 2 of 3 tapes. Okay, Don, you started in the traffic department.
When I first went to work for Mr. Cunningham in the traffic department, I was in the office as a clerk.
Okay, where was that?
That was right by Logan Street Bridge.
Oh, really? In a building by itself? Or?
No. It was in building 75, was it?
Okay, that part of the car assembly plant that later was car assembly plant?
Right.
Okay.
And strictly desk work at the time in regards to the beginning of production and the manifest for the cars coming through and that sort of thing. We hadn't, when I first went to work for Mr. Cunningham, we hadn't got into what we would call full production.
All right.
But when we started getting into full production, it was, he had charge of the loading of the automobiles.
All right.
And boxcars.
Oh, boxcars.
Right.
Oh my goodness.
40-foot cars.
We were putting cars in boxcars.
Automobiles in cars, boxcars. When this got to be a round the clock deal, which it became very, very fast because all automobile companies was out to get their cars on the first.
Yeah.
So it developed into a round the clock deal right away, quick. And when this happened, we were loading cars on 2 tracks, 16 40-foot cars on each track. And Lauren Corwin and Al Lee was in charge of the crews on the daytime, and Nick Pilger and myself was in charge at night.
So you were running kind of 2 shifts?
Right.
2 long shifts.
Right. You could practically call it an 11-hour deal.
Yeah.
About the only thing there was in between was long enough to change crews.
Okay. And that was all done in that 32 building that was before it was enclosed and all that. Were these in the open?
Where the cars were loaded, that building was enclosed. Okay. As the cars came off from the assembly line, the majority of them was run upstairs on the 2nd floor.
Oh, okay.
And of course, as they came in, we had the manifest for that car.
Yeah.
And as they came in, the manifest would go to the office, and then as we would get the information from the main office of where cars would be shipped to, and like that was the way the loads were made up.
All right.
And there was four cars in each boxcar.
Okay.
2 that were raised up.
All right.
And 2 that were down.
How did you ever get a car inside of a little dinky boxcar?
They had what they called the Evans loaders. Okay. And these Evans loaders was metal racks. That we had one driver for each side on each shift. So you had four drivers that knew what they were doing in loading these cars.
All right.
You'd lower these racks to the floor.
They're inside the car.
They're inside the car, and you drive one car in on one of the lowered racks and back that one on the opposite rack.
So you had enough room in the doorway so you could actually get a car driven into.
The doors were the big double doors.
Okay.
And then after that car was backed in and backed, or drove in and backed into that rack, and the rack was raised to the ceiling.
Okay.
Then the other car was driven in and onto the opposite rack.
Okay, so it was kind of driven in and backed up into the other side?
You drive the car in underneath the one that was
you just raised,
and back it in.
All right.
And then that would be raised.
Yeah.
And then you had what they called the tie-down chains on there.
Okay.
And before these cars, I'm kind of going forward and backward a bit here in my information, but before these cars were driven into the box cars, they were run over a pit, and there were tie-down hooks fastened onto the frames.
Okay.
For the ones that were going to go up.
All right.
And they'd fasten these chains from the racks onto these tie-down hooks, the frames of the car, and secure those two cars so that they were all tight and ready to go.
All right.
Then you would drive one in, and that car would be driven in and go frontwards in underneath the car that was up.
All right.
And then the second one would go in and do the same.
On the opposite side.
On the opposite side. Then we had men that would jump right in there immediately with blocks of wood. They would set the brakes secure.
Yeah.
Then they would put blocks of wood under all four wheels.
Okay.
And nail these blocks of wood to the floor.
Well, they actually nail them right to the car floor. Oh, my goodness.
And there another little humorous thing would happen. Every now and then one of the boys would nail the other guy's overhauls right to the floor right while he was nailing the block. So when he'd go to get up, he couldn't.
He was nailed to the floor.
Right.
Oh, my goodness.
That was one of the little humorous tricks that was pulled quite often. Now, to back up again, these cars, when they were brought into the building, we had two men. One would go up each side, open these car doors, had an oil can that they'd squirt so that it would be easier to close the doors and like that.
Okay.
And any refuse or anything that was in that car, they would clean that out.
All right.
The cars were supposed to be cleaned before they came into us, but we had to always check them because they weren't always done.
Okay.
And make sure that the tie-down chains and everything were in these cars. So that if everything wasn't just the way it should be, well, then it was taken care of.
Was the car clean at this point outside? The outside of the car clean so that you didn't have to fool around with that? Or?
We did no exterior
no
cleaning.
Exterior cleaning.
We had cars that didn't look like they'd been cleaned, but we didn't bother with the exterior. That was railroad responsibility.
Okay.
But we put 16 cars on each track.
Yeah. Yeah.
Every now and then the railroad would make a mistake and bring 17 in, and then they'd put one of them through the end of the building.
Oh my Lord, really?
Oh yes.
Right through the stopper and right
through the end of the building. If they brought 16 in, well, that's what they had, and if they brought the 17th one in, it was still 16 as far as they were concerned.
Oh. Okay.
So they would go right on in and just keep right on, and we had the end of that building knocked out time and time and time again.
Really, that was an occurrence that happened fairly often then.
It happened too often, but for anyone from the outside, they wouldn't think it happened that often. But no matter how often it happened, it was too often.
See, they were using steam engines, must have been in those days.
At that time. At that time.
Yeah. Okay.
And that was another reason why they liked to make sure that they had the full string of cars to put in so that the engine would not get inside the building.
With all the smoke and and stuff.
Right.
I bet that was a mess, wasn't it? Did it ever get in the building?
Oh yes. And then every time, there was certain parts of the. I'll get into this more when I get into my real end of it. But there were certain parts of the plant and like that it was almost an impossibility to switch a track without getting inside of the building. And of course, the employees would all scream bloody murder when that.
Because I imagine it blew soot and smoke and.
It was the gas from the coal.
Yeah. Interesting.
Now this tie down, as I mentioned, and driving over these pits to do that. We had 2 men working in the pit at all times to put these tie downs on these frames of the cars. We had one employee there in our group that raised goats, and occasionally we'd have to use him down in the pit. And the other person that was in the pit wouldn't stay in very long because he smelled just like his goats that he raised.
Peculiar odor.
Very peculiar. Had Don Darling down there one time with him working, and Don came out. Oh, he was unhappy. And we called this fellow Gosh. I've forgotten his real name.
Yeah.
We called him Gosh. These fellows could only work in these pits so long because of the gas from the exhaust. You know, they had to get out and get fresh air.
Get some air. Yeah.
And they would go out and sit underneath the ramp that was going up to the second floor.
Okay.
To relax and get a little fresh air.
Yeah.
And this one day when Don was down in the pit with Gosh and he was out, and then Gosh finally came out. Don was prepared, and he was up above on the second floor with a bucket of water and dumped down over it.
But that made it worse.
We had quite a session over that because Gosh thought that I should write a reprimand on Don Darling, and I said, I don't know that Don Darling did it. I didn't see him, and I said, he hasn't said a word to me about doing it. But we didn't write any reprimand anyway.
Poor old Gosh.
It was very obvious who it was. It dumped the water on him. Oh, we used to have.
Now, Don, did all the cars go out by rail at that time, or was some of them shipped out by the trucks?
The trucks hadn't entered into the picture too much when we first started after the war.
All right.
But the trucks were in the making.
All right.
But they hadn't got underway yet at that time.
So we were shipping most things by rail.
Most by rail, except for the driveways from. That they would pick up.
Okay.
These boys that loaded these cars were really crackerjacks, and what was that? I don't know. Very, very few times did we have to take a car out because of scratch or damage. Once in a great while, it would happen.
Yeah.
And we'd have to haul a car out and replace it.
Did they ever have train wrecks where they smashed cars in that way?
Oh yes, I mean not on
big ones,
not on our property.
No, but when they're traveling,
same as they have wrecks with the overland nowadays.
Yeah. In those cases? Did they haul the cars back to the plant or?
Depended on how bad the damage was and whether or not the railroad wanted to accept it and take care of it themselves.
Yeah.
Quite often those would be bought by the railroads and handled by them.
Yeah.
First, actually, they were their responsibility.
Sure. Once you left.
So we didn't see the cars coming back that was hauled by rail as much as we did the ones coming back that was hauled by overland truck later on.
All right. See, now, someplace in there we had a huge strike too, didn't we? Right after the war.
That was almost before we got under.
Yeah, we just barely got underway, didn't we?
We really hadn't got what you would call underway. 143 days?
Yeah, some huge long period of time. Yeah.
And that was where Mr. Skinner said that we would receive our checks every payday, and we did. The salary. Yeah.
Well, what did you do during that long period of time? Were you still out in the
plant, we had to report for work, and we would go practically crazy because there really wasn't anything to do.
Yes.
When these strikes were shorter, they're in traffic, they would take you up into the main office, and we would help them catch up on back work.
Sure.
But that long strike, most of the, in fact, I could practically say all of the offices that they needed to definitely keep going and like that were located down at Hotel Olds.
Oh, I see. Okay.
And they took over a couple of floors down there.
Kind of a temporary office.
Right. But we fellas there and under Mr. Cunningham, We just reported for work every day and we'd wander around the plant.
But you came right into the plant.
Oh, yes.
Yeah. Were there pickets and those kinds of things going on?
Oh, yeah, but here again, when we would have our executive meetings, and we always had those regardless, you know. And whenever we had those, that's what the one thing Mr. Skinner would tell us before we would leave the meeting. He'd say, "Now you boys remember, these are your sons and your brothers and your neighbors and your friends that are out there on that picket line, and treat them as such. Don't treat them any other way. Treat them just like you'd want to be treated." He didn't want any trouble.
Yeah.
He was very much that way, that they were doing what they thought was the right thing.
Sure.
And treat them in that manner. There were a few little problems up around the front office there, where some of these hourly workers would try to keep some of the top people from getting into the parking lot and like that. And there was a couple, 3 times there was a little skirmish, but not much. But as far as out in the plant is concerned, for we people that were on salary and on supervision, that they didn't give us any trouble. We'd speak to them as we were in the plant.
Sure.
Speak to them when we leave.
Yeah.
But we were there all day.
Yeah.
All day. But it was a lot longer day than when we were working.
I'm sure it was. Yeah.
A lot longer day.
Okay, now that got all over eventually, and we went back to work. And you stayed out there in the shipping end of the business,
right?
Okay.
As long as we had the round the clock loading, it continued just the way I stated it. Nick Pilger and myself on nights, and Lauren Farman and Al Lee on days.
Okay.
And when things begin to sort of taper off, so that we were only loading on the day shift.
Okay.
By Al Lee and Lauren Farwin, and then Nick Pilger and I were out of that phase of it. But Mr. Cunningham again put us into the office, and a couple of the younger fellows he let go, or they transferred to elsewhere. And Nick Pilger and I took over the handling of the manifests and the preparations of the paperwork and everything before the cars were shipped.
Okay, and this was still in the office out there in the shipping.
Right. And so, we were still working under Mr. Cunningham. Charlie Grable, who had charge of rail operations at that time, lost, and I don't remember whether Mr. Pettit passed away or retired. But anyway, when Mr. Pettit left Charlie Grable's employ in the rail operations, I was given the opportunity to move from the warehouse over with Mr. Grable in rail operations, still in traffic.
Okay, but now, was that in the administration building at that time?
No,
where was that?
No. That was all right out there by Logan Street Bridge.
Still all out there in the shipping building?
His office was right next to Storage 1 Receiving.
All right, okay.
So I moved over with Mr. Grable. And continued as a senior clerk.
All right.
I forgot whether I was a senior or specialized, but makes no difference. I was a clerk.
Yeah.
And I continued in that position until such time as Mr. Grable retired.
Okay.
And then I was promoted to supervisor of railroad operations.
Okay. Now, had the new assembly plant had not happened yet at this point in time, or had it?
Yes. The new assembly line had. See, I went to work for Mr. Grable about 1952.
Okay, so the new plant had happened.
And I was moved up to supervision in 1956.
All right. During the time when the new plant was built out there, Don, what did they do with the shipping facilities?
Well, they went on.
Out of the same building, or did you move?
No, they went on out of the same building.
Okay.
But by that time, the trucks had taken over the bulk of the automobile.
Oh, all right.
You see, all this time, the trucks were coming into the picture.
Mm-hmm.
And by the time that the new assembly line was operating in that building, the loading by rail had moved out underneath the Logan Street Bridge
Okay.
on the Grand Trunk siding only.
All right.
The New York Central and Penn Central had nothing to do with any cars being loaded by rail.
All right.
It was a double track and a sheet metal building that had been built underneath the Logan Street Bridge.
Yeah.
And it was very shortly after that building was opened that they came into the tri-level phase of it.
All right. Got rid of the boxcar business.
Right. Mm-hmm. Now, when they first moved out there was still boxcars.
Still doing the boxcars.
But I believe that they had increased from the 40-foot to the 50-foot at that time.
Okay.
I'm not. See, I'd gotten out of it.
All right, that's okay.
I would see these things happen because of my work with the railroad.
Sure.
But they had moved the rail completely over onto the Grand Trunk side.
All right. At the time when you were dealing with it, was it on both sides of the house? Were both New York Central?
You mean after I moved out and into the rail end of it?
Well, when it was out in the 32 area, was that on Grand Trunk?
That was on both.
On both tracks.
You had the siding that pulled in underneath the bridge and into the plant or Grand Trunk, and you had the one that was almost straight in or the New York Central.
So you actually shipped on both tracks.
Right. But when they moved out,
yes,
Grand Trunk took over the whole thing as far as rail was concerned.
All right. Okay. Then, Don, how you were in the office there and doing your manifests and your cooking work and so forth. What happened beyond that? Now we were shipping mostly by truck.
Well, of course, now when Nick Pilger and I was writing the manifests and like that, we were still shipping by rail at that time.
Yeah.
Up until the time I was transferred into the rail operations, we were still shipping
mostly by rail.
Well, now we're losing a little all the time.
Oh, it was slowly starting to go down.
Well, no, it got to where it wasn't slowly.
Okay.
It was slowly staying there, but it was speedily going to the truck.
To the truck business. Okay.
You see, we had Sober and C&J. And the one right there,
industrial
transport, and with three of them, they were really taking care of the automobile shipping,
moving a lot of cars.
You betcha.
All right. So this was then the transition period when we went from all rail to almost all truck.
Almost all truck, right?
All right.
Now the tri-level helped the railroad to continue probably longer than it had been boxcars all the time, because it was a more modern way. You could drive your cars right up on your different levels.
Mm-hmm.
Start with your top level, and then your center, and then the bottom, and very, very speedily load cars, and very efficiently.
Mm-hmm. And you got a lot more cars on a railroad car.
Oh yes,
at that time.
Definitely. When they first started by tri-level, the cars were open, but it come to the point where they had to use the enclosed cars because people were stealing blind of the cars being shipped out open like that.
Oh, really?
Oh, yes.
What were they taking?
Anything and everything
that was loose, so to speak.
Things that you just wouldn't believe. Spark plugs, for instance.
Really?
Oh, yes.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
Isn't that something?
So they had to enclose the cars to
All right.
keep from pilferage.
Did the tri-level cars themselves, was that a traumatic experience getting to use those, or was it difficult, or did it just sort of work fairly good initially?
No, it was done very, very, very good. It was still the Evans people that were behind
Okay.
the transformation and like
Uh-huh.
that,
Uh-huh.
and it was done very, very successfully. Of course, the flatbed had to be much longer,
Yes.
and
Those were very long cars, as I remember.
right.
80 or 90 feet or something, yeah.
I haven't been in Lansing enough of late to know whether they're still shipping cars by rail
Oh,
at
yeah.
all or
Yeah.
not.
Oh, yeah. A lot of cars go out by rail, still do. Okay. So that transition was made fairly effectively from the old box car to the tri-level car. And you were still in railroad operations, Don?
No,
Okay, now where had you gone?
I had gone. No, I was in real operations, but when
That transition was occurring?
transition, yes, I was in real operations.
All right. And then what happened later?
When I first went into real operations, I'd say I was a clerk, and my work at that time was to get to work in the morning at 6 o'clock and make a complete yard check
All right.
of everything that was in the plant. I was to be back in the office as soon after 7 o'clock as I could possibly back in there, because that was our Bible to work with for the day.
This told you how much was out in the yards.
But no, but just what was in our yard itself.
Yeah.
It told what cars were up at building 62 for parts and service.
All right.
It told what cars were at the engine plant for loading engines. It told what.
Oh, okay. Railroad cars, not automobiles.
No, railroad cars. I had nothing to do when I left.
Yeah.
When I left Mr. Cunningham and went with Mr. Grabo, I left as far as
automobiles.
As far as automobiles was concerned.
All right.
For rail.
All right. Okay. So you had the whole plant basically from a rail shipping and receiving?
Right.
All right.
Right.
Okay. Now what then?
And we worked off from this yard check to make sure that everything that we had asked to have done the previous night was what was done and in completion.
Okay.
Then after that, we would start contacting the various stores, parts and service and engine plant and stores F and stores 5 and stores 1 and so forth and so on. Lindy Glazier for the steel building.
Oh, yes.
And Bill Bennett for that area down there, to see what their requirements were going to be for during the day.
All right.
And they would give us their orders.
Okay.
To see the way they would know what they had each and every day. We wrote from our office the receiving of all cars for the last 24 hours.
Okay.
And anything pertaining to these stores was, of course, inbound parts and like that. Any of these stores that was strictly the shipping was for empty cars.
Okay.
So these stores had the report of what was available to them in the line of parts that was coming in. So if it's the receiving stores, they would tell us what their requirement was going to be for that day, like batteries, wheels, tires, so forth and so on. Then we would issue the orders to the railroad before 8 o'clock in the morning.
Okay.
And we would call what they called the Saginaw Yard, and we would give them the instructions by stores or by track. And they would make out their worksheet for the conductor. And then they would start out to gather up the cars that we had ordered, both inbound loads and empties.
Yeah.
And they would usually enter our plant around the 9 o'clock or 9:30 time. They would always stop at our office when they first came in to see if there had been any additions or any corrections. Then they would go ahead to do their work. we would tell them if there was certain spots that had to be taken care of immediately or at a specific hour. And then they would work around accordingly.
Mm-hmm.
There were times that we would have to go out and buy a cigar to get them out of the coffee shop down there at Pine Street because they got a little careless and they weren't doing as they should do.
Or paying attention.
Right. And then there were other times that we had to go a little higher than that and call the yard master at Saginaw Yard and say, Mr. Jones, your boys are acting up a little bit over here. They're not doing the job properly and like that. Because we only could go so far.
Sure.
We went out and said, please.
Yeah.
Will you please? It's got to be taken care of now. Here's a cigar. Then we'd come back, and if it wasn't taken care of, then we'd have to go higher up. Now, this didn't happen all the time, but it did happen. Yeah. They were human.
Sure.
And they had the horse on the track, and they knew
sure
it.
Did. Yeah.
So we had to be nice.
Yeah.
You couldn't get rough.
Yeah.
You did occasionally. So my work there in the rail office from the beginning was, as I say, clerical work and like that, and that continued in that very manner until such time as Mr. Graybo retired.
All right.
And then I was moved up to his position.
Okay.
And then my clerical staff started doing the legwork.
What you had been doing.
Right. Mm-hmm. And at that time, we were still trying to work on a one shift basis as far as our office is concerned.
Okay.
But it wasn't too long after Mr. Graybo retired that I was able to convince Mr. Carlin that we should cover it at night as well as, because they were constantly calling at me at home, and the things weren't being carried on because there was no on the spot to keep it going.
Yeah, they would just sort of stop.
Right.
Yeah.
So we put on the second crew there in our office, which made it much better, both for me and for Oldsmobile.
Yeah.
Because if there was something that needed to be taken care of, there was somebody there in the office to handle it.
All right.
If it was necessary for whoever was there, we always had at least two there at night. Something, but then it developed into three at night. But whoever was there, if they had problems, that they would usually first call me, and if it was necessary, well, then I would call the supervision at the railroad. But these things didn't happen all that often. But it was still better to have our night, our switching operations covered at night.
You said Babe Carwin was the traffic manager at that time? What kind of a person was Babe?
Mr. Carwin was a very fine person to work for. He started in at Oldsmobile under Mr. Cunningham out there in the warehouse where I started in traffic.
Okay.
And I have forgotten who was traffic manager before Babe. I tried to come up with a name and I can't.
All right.
But when he left Oldsmobile, they contacted Mr. Cunningham and wanted him to take the traffic manager's position. Earl wanted to stay out in the plant. He did not wish to go upstairs. And he recommended Mr. Carlin, and he got the job. And he did very, very well. After I took over Mr. Graybo's work and was in charge of the rail operations, if there was anything that come up that needed to be taken care of between Oldsmobile and the railroad, but Mr. Carlin would call me and say, I want you in my office at a specific time. Then he would call Mr. Harmon from the Grand Trunk, if that's where the trouble was, and has to have him in his office at that same time. Or if it was the New York Central or Penn Central,
Sure.
he would call Mr. Jones and have him in his office at the same time. When I arrived and Mr. Jones or Mr. Harmon arrived, Mr. Corwin would tell us what the problem was,
Mhm.
and then he would say to us, okay, now you two talk this over.
Mhm.
And when you come up with a solution, then I'll enter into it with you.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
And either Mr. Jones and I or Mr. Harmon and I would discuss the situation. And usually it didn't take but a short time to solve it.
Mhm.
And then we would turn to Mr. Corwin and then he would enter into it and he'd say, okay, well, let's hear what it's all about. And either Mr. Harmon or I or Mr. Jones or I would explain to him what we were going to do to correct whatever was wrong.
Mhm.
Usually Mr. Corwin would say, okay, that's fine. Thank you for dropping up. And that was the end of
Oh,
it.
yeah. Okay. Where was
Well,
his office at that time?
Over in 60.
It was over by 60.
Mhm.
Okay.
And then before Mr. Corwin retired, well, the traffic moved from 60 to 62.
Yeah, that's where I remember it.
Mhm. So even when he was up there, he still handled these situations the same way.
Same way. Uh-huh. Yeah.
And very, very seldom would he call me up there just between he and I. If it was something he wished to discuss with me, he'd do it over the telephone. Very seldom did he drop in my office.
Yeah. Okay.
Very seldom.
So he spent most of his time up there,
Right.
so to speak.
Right. But very, very, very nice fellow to work for. He ran his department so that the communications were pretty good. And we used to have the department dinners, not during working hours.
Yeah.
But down at Dines, we would have a Christmas dinner.
Okay.
Or maybe we'd have a Easter dinner or something. But he would have departmental get together functions, which was good relations. We all enjoyed that.
Right. Those were all independent of anything that Oldsmobile did.
Well, Oldsmobile through Mr. Corwin would help a little on the.
Well, I'm sure, but Oldsmobile had their
Yes,
Christmas party.
This was strictly departmental.
Yeah, those are strictly departmental things.
Right.
Okay.
I have pictures here of our departmental dinners.
We'll look at those in a minute.
The communications between our office and upstairs was very, very good. Our office took care of everything pertaining to rail as soon as it arrived in Lansing and was reported to us. It was our baby until such time as it either was unloaded or loaded and was released.
All right.
We did no tracing.
Okay, there were guys in the office that did that, weren't there?
The tracing was done upstairs.
Yeah, all right.
This reaching out to where is this and where is that and when will it be
When's
here?
it gonna get here? Yeah.
That was all done upstairs.
Okay.
Our responsibility was strictly in Lansing and in our plants.
Operations, so to speak.
We had the main plant, the forge plant, and then we had the Saginaw Street plant and the parts warehouse.
All right.
They all was our baby as far as the rail was concerned.
Did that cause any problem, Don, having that widespread?
Not too much. I always had people. I say I had people. There always were people in the stores and like that was very, very cooperative and very communicative to advise me what was on their track, what they needed, and like that. Most of it could be done by telephone.
All right.
Occasionally, I had to go down to Pine Street Gate where they always kept what they called gate cars, and I'd go down to Pine Street Gate and get a gate car and go to the forge plant or the Saginaw Street plant or the parts warehouse or whatever, but that didn't happen too often.
Or some specific problem that was occurring there.
I used to do that periodically anyway to make sure that they were maintaining the tracks and all. You see, we had to maintain the tracks inside of our plants ourselves because General Motors owned.
Okay.
As soon as that track started inside of our property, that was our track.
All right.
That wasn't the railroad track.
Okay. So did you have to then get guys to come in and fix it if something happened?
We had our own people to do that.
All right.
Up until about 1963. They discontinued, the engineering department discontinued furnishing people to handle the tracks. Now, if there was a emergency, I could contact the engineering department and they would give assistance if it could be done quicker than someone from the railroad.
Okay.
But they gave up doing it,
Mm-hmm.
and we contracted it out.
Okay.
But there was times we had to come through with our own because of if there was a derailment or if there was a broken rail or something that had to be done right now.
Yeah.
We would come through our engineering department and
That's the plant engineering organization.
Yes, and do it.
Mm-hmm. You mentioned derailments. Did those kinds of things happen very often?
In the wintertime more than in the summer.
Okay. Ice or something in a quick point. Or...
Always bad weather.
Mm-hmm.
Always when it was disagreeable, there would be problems of that sort. Mm-hmm. And down on the Grand Trunk side, we had accidents on the tracks with the through.
The main line was right there.
Yes.
Yeah.
We had pileups down there by Logan Street Bridge. I don't know how many times, but several times while I had this work. Mm-hmm. And of course that would tie things up with good.
Yeah, imagine make a mess out of things. Yeah.
And then if they had a derailment on what we called the belt line, which was the line from out by Saginaw and into our plant, if they had a derailment in that area like that was going to tie things up for a period of time, there was times that we had to use a track that ran from the Grand Trunk into our plant down by the sheet metal department down almost across from the power plant. Mm-hmm. Now, this was not legal according to all rules, regulations, but there were times that we would break a rule and we would get the Grand Trunk to come in and help us out for
bring a few cars in.
Well, or come in and make a switch or two for us. Doing it as a friendly, gentlemanly gesture. Mm-hmm. But we weren't supposed to use that track for that purpose. Yeah. But it was there, and we did do it occasionally. We finally did away with that track, so it wasn't a temptation.
There was a building built there.
Well, that's what really did it. Yeah. Right.
Okay. Were the derailments such that you had to bring people into the plant to put cars back on the track, or how?
Yes. For example, Building 62 was an incline.
Yes, up that hill to get to that dock. Yeah.
And occasionally they would go up a little too fast, and they would break the bumper, and they'd go off the end, you know. And we'd have to bring outside help in too. And we had one at the motor plant where that's down into
the dip,
down into the pit.
Yeah.
And we had one down there by the restaurant right there at
Sal's.
Right there by Pine Street. Yeah. We tore that thing all up in pretty good shape.
It ran into the restaurant.
Well, it leaned over into
kind of leaned down.
Yeah. You see, the West Side Fuel had a siding there up until about 1960, 61.
They were actually using that for coal in the early days, weren't they?
Right. Now, I'm sure it happened when Mr. Graybo was yardmaster, the same as it did for me. The West Side Fuel, when they wanted to service, they wouldn't call the railroad. They would call our office and tell us, when you order your cars for tomorrow, please order car number so-and-so, which would be a load of coal.
Oh, okay.
So we would give the railroad the order for them the same as we would for ourselves.
Oh, yeah.
Which made it, excuse me, made it easier for them and more sure that they were going to get what they were after, because they weren't going to put themselves out too much for one or two cars when they were handling as many as they were.
Right.
So we would just add theirs to ours and take care of it in that way. So that way we had pretty good affiliations with the West Side Fuel, as long as they were receiving coal.
Yeah.
These derailments were something that, oh, you had to be on the spot to see how bad they were.
Yeah. Yeah.
You had to get as much specific information from the yardmaster as he would be able to give you of how long. And then you had to notify, particularly the production tracks.
Yeah.
Like where they were loading engines.
Yeah.
Or where they were loading axles. But these places were being fed from production. And therefore you had to have your cars in there all the time for loading.
Because they're keeping moving.
And if you were unable to give them the service that they required at the time that they required it, they did have some storage area, but it wouldn't take care of very long a time.
Yeah.
So I would have to go out and see what the situation was, talk with Mr. Jones. He would give me a time as close as he could, then I'd go back and make my phone calls or do it personally to these points that had to be covered. And then we would make the adjustments the best we could, and there was times that we had to shut down these areas because they just couldn't get the service. This again didn't happen too often, but it was things that had to be taken care of so that you knew where you stood and you knew how to plan.
Yeah.
And when it comes to the frames and like that, we always had that yard out there with lots of them in. But there were times that when they took an inventory, they didn't count right.
They were the wrong one.
And they didn't happen to hit it. And if we weren't able to be available to get something in there real quick, that caused a problem. You'd have the Jack McGinn out there walking. Who was it before him?
Let's see, Mike Minnow.
Mike Minnow. Yeah. They'd be pacing up and down the siding. Where are they? When are they going to get here? We've only got 20 minutes yet, and this and that.
Yeah.
All that happened several times.
Oh yeah.
One time when I was in the bowling alley, they called me at the shop, and they were really getting hysterical. And finally, I told he's still on supervision there at Oldsmobile. He was there working under McGinn. What the heck is his name? Anyway, I finally told him. I said, "Sir, they're right out there on the track. All you've got to do is go unload them." I said, "And if you don't find them," I said, "press that button. You know where it is." The next morning, Bob Cook called me up and he says, "What did you tell?" I can't speak last night. And I said, "Well," I said, "after the third phone call, I said, if we can't serve you in time, you're just going to have to use that button." And Mr. Cook said, "No wonder he got all excited." But there again, these are just things that happen just once in a while.
Did we ever talk about buying our own engine to switch cars around so we didn't?
Yes, it was discussed, but we didn't have the room to store enough inside of our plant to do that.
Okay.
We had to depend on that space out there along the belt line and just below our marshalling area and all that. And we tried at one time to work out a plan where they would bring down so far and we would pick up this and that, but it never materialized. No, it just never worked out. I don't know, you might check on this yourself, but I had a track named after me there.
Which one?
The track that runs between the Logan Street Bridge and Pine Street right along the wall.
Yeah.
When they put that second track in there, right,
Oh,
right
yeah.
below the wall,
Yeah.
that was the Irwin track.
That was the Irwin track, huh?
The way the railroad operates, I imagine it's still the Irwin track.
It's still there.
Yeah, but I imagine it's still called the Irwin track.
So you must then remember when we put it in.
Oh, well, I was right there. I was, yeah.
Why was that put in, Don?
Well, again, it's, when they come in there to do the switching at the east end of the plant, and they take a load or two loads or three loads out, they don't want to go way out to the yard with them.
Okay.
So they would pull them back down to the bridge and shove them up on there on the Irwin track.
Okay. So it was just a parking place.
Right. Or when they came in the morning with their cars for the day, they would drop off the ones for the top end of the plant, the west end, on the Irwin track, and then they would shove the ones for the east end of the plant on down ahead of the engine and take care of it. And it worked out beautifully.
Oh, do you remember about when that went in? That must have been in,
For first part of 60.
I was gonna say either early 60s or late 50s.
Right around 60.
Uh-huh.
When they were putting that track in, and they were pouring that retaining wall, they had to work right across the track with their boom, with their bucket of concrete.
Yeah.
And they kept me informed at all times when they were out there working. Even though my office was right close by, I had no vision of them out there to see them. Well, this one day they had some cement that they had to finish pouring before they quit, and it was running them overtime. But they didn't report it to me. So when I ordered the crew in, like that, they came in at the time they always do, which was usually just before 5 o'clock or between 4:30 and 5. And the man that rides the end of the cars coming in usually hopped off right there at Logan Street.
Okay.
And then they would shove in and then pull some on the Irwin track. Well, this day when they went in and no one riding the head car, and that they were still working out there, they ran right into that boom, and they knocked the fella off the wall.
Oh, gracious sakes!
And when they knocked him off, he went completely out. Well, the crane operator thought he killed him, and it was quite a situation. Well, I didn't realize what had happened, and so I was walked down through the plant, and I was going out Pine Street or Division Street to go home. And the officer at the gate said, "You're not going home and leave that situation there like it is, are you?" And I turned and looked back, and I said, "My God, when did that happen?" He said, "When they came in, they hit that boom and swung it around and knocked that fellow off." So I went back, got a hold of the conductor. I said, "Do you know what's going on here?" He said, "No, what's wrong?" And I told him, and I thought he was going to pass out. He said, "I didn't realize they were still out there." I said, "I didn't know they were either." But it so happened that all they did was knock that guy out.
Lucky.
They took him to the hospital, and the operator of the crane went to the hospital. And the guy had already come to, and he says to him, "What did you knock me off that wall for?"
Right.
But it turned out there was no one hurt. There was some damage done.
Lucky.
To the crane and like that. But there was nothing they could do to the railroad because they did not report to the office. So it's just, between knocking the end of a building out now and then, and this happening, and derailments, and
they kept you out of mischief for good many years.
It surely did. It surely did. My wife Dorothy got to the point where when they called me at 2:30, 3 o'clock in the morning, she wouldn't even hear the phone ring.
Oh my God!
She just became accustomed to it.
When did you retire, Don?
May, it was the first week in May of 1971.
1971. You stayed right on doing that sort of thing up to the time you
Well, that
retired.
time, right,
Okay.
right.
Yeah, that's great.
Very, very interesting work. To see when they took over the parts warehouse and made it GMAD,
Yeah,
that took that away from me.
yeah.
And Saginaw street plant and forge plant, the main plant was still ours.
Yeah, yeah.
I never went back after I retired to see just how they were operating it from upstairs in the main office.
Yeah.
They moved everything up shortly after.
Yeah.
Within 2 years.
Yeah.
Moved it all upstairs.
Yeah. And then ultimately, they all ended up over in Building 7.
Right. And of course, it was all done by the new modern methods.
Right. You had not had computers in those early days at all.
I had the telephone and longhand.
And longhand.
All of our records.
All right.
There's still records stored over there in Bowers. I'm sure there is.
Oh, I'm sure there is too.
We used to fill those.
Yeah. Yeah.
And Mark, we'd fill one each year. I never knew where they stored them, but they stored them.
Yeah. That's great. Well, Don, you've got a mess of pictures over there. I think maybe it'd be nice if we sat down and kind of ground through those. So I'm going to shut this off for a minute here. Okay, this is a photograph of.
This is one of our office parties, a farewell to this gentleman here, Mr. Green.
Mr. Green is in the middle with the white shirt and the tie on.
Right.
Okay, next to the gal.
Mr. Carvin, traffic manager next to him.
All right.
And these are all employees. There's myself.
Hiding in back.
And there's Earl,
Hershey?
no. Cecil Straub.
Okay, now this looks like
Tony Stornop.
Tony Stornett, and then Cecil.
Straub.
Okay,
And Joe Stornop.
all right. Who's the lady?
There's Bob Hosel.
Lady is?
That's Mr. Carvin's secretary, but
Okay. Tom Osler. This guy looks familiar too.
he was Mr. Carvin's assistant at that time. Jim can't speak his name.
It's okay. Yeah, this guy back here with the glasses on looks familiar too.
Yeah, and another one is here's Don.
Oh yeah, Don. Darn, isn't it disgusting?
It's awful. I can't remember the name.
Don't feel bad. See, this fellow here in the back with the glasses on also looks familiar.
Well, that's Jim Stanaway.
Okay.
Don Fenoyer. That right?
I think so. I think that's his last name, Don somebody though.
That's one of our
Okay.
parties.
Wait a minute, there's something on the back. I pick up too.
Well, this was my Dale Carnegie graduation class.
When was that?
Let's see, I graduated from Dale Carnegie right around the 60th year.
1960. Okay.
I got the book there.
There, these three did. You had a lady in there with you.
Yeah, they were all in the class.
Mm-hmm.
These were our two instructors.
Back in the sun.
Back in the center.
All right.
But that was up to Walnut Hills.
Okay. File that over there. Don't get confused. This is a Cecil Straub.
Cecil Straub's retirement party.
All right.
And this is
There's Dave Carwin again.
and that's the secretary at that time.
Okay. God, it looks almost like the same batch of folk.
It is, pretty much.
Is yours,
That down Doorhouse there.
right? Then on the back, Paul guy.
Mhm.
See, I remember this guy too. I can't remember his name.
Stand away again.
Yeah, they're standing on.
Tony Storm,
Mhm.
Bill Stratz,
Okay, yeah,
there's Earl again.
there's
Don, that's his first
John,
name.
whatever, yeah, Bob Mosel next to him. Over here, you got a bunch of people on the back. That's yours. Okay.
Now, this was Irv Smith's retirement from the department.
All right.
He was Dave's assistant one, and I couldn't think of
Okay,
it.
that's the guy we were trying to figure out.
Irv Smith.
Okay.
This is his retirement party.
Okay.
This girl here married this gentleman here.
Very far right hand, two people.
He was a foreman on the tri-level loading dock.
That isn't,
Glenn,
yeah,
he's passed away now.
oh, yeah, he had some basketball players.
And he married this little
Mhm.
secretary here.
Okay.
And there's Earl again. There's Don. There's Tony.
Yeah. See, Bob Mosel was in here all this time at this time, apparently. Is that Bob Mosel that I keep seeing here, or is that somebody else?
Yeah. But by this time here, Bob Hosel
Was up in the department.
was up in the department. Oh, wait a minute, he was still in purchasing.
Okay, so that is a
But-
Bob.
Mm-hmm.
Or is that Bob?
It is.
Yeah, okay. All right. So is there a date on the back of that?
No, oh, this was her retirement party, and I can't remember her name, so help
All
me.
right,
But it's the same ones again.
same group of folk.
Yeah. There's Mike Belton. He hasn't
Oh,
been,
yeah.
hasn't been any of the others.
Mosel was very young there. So. This is a recording of Donald L. Irwin of Sebring, Florida. The recording was made by Jim Walkinshaw of the Oldsmobile History Center on January 25th, 1989. This is tape number 3 of 3 tapes. Okay, now what have you got here?
Now, while I was employed, I was chairman of the Olds Golf League 3 years, 2 different times.
All right,
I was chairman under Gail Retzlaff
yeah,
for 3 years.
yeah,
When Bill Mahoney was our personnel director.
Yeah,
Then I was chairman for 3 years under Dale Bovee
all right,
when Harold Cutler was
okay,
personnel
all
director.
right.
This is a picture taken out at Indian Hills.
What are you guys looking in the creek?
Back when Gail Retzlaff. This is Chet Baylor
Okay,
and Rademacher
yeah.
and myself.
What are you looking for?
Oh, just golf balls, you
Somebody
know.
lost some balls in the creek.
And Bob Woolhouse was our photographer
Yeah,
at that time.
sure, Bob.
And Bob took the 3 of us out there, and he put us in these positions just for a picture.
Uh-huh. Oops, there's another picture on the back of
But
that.
that's the same.
That's that same one we were just
Yeah.
looking at. All right.
Now, this is the Quarter Century Club in 1960,
Oh, yes. Uh-huh.
when I became a 25-year, in 1959.
This is the inductees sort of
Right.
that year.
Right.
Right. So you know who all those guys are?
And no, I don't know, but there's Joe Dorno.
Okay, this guy is Don Schofield. I recognize him. Let's see.
I should know.
Oh, that's Johnny Turek.
Yeah. Here's Hauser.
Oh, I'll be darned. That's George's dad. There's Brown, the guy by the name of Brown.
Well,
And Brenner.
that's George right there.
That's George Hauser?
Yeah,
Yeah, really?
that's him.
Hold on. Okay, look different than I remembered it. Okay, those are all the guys I can remember out of that bunch.
Well, that's it.
Wait a minute, what's on the back
Well,
side?
that's,
Oh, that's something else.
yeah.
All right, okay.
this is the bowling group.
All right,
Ken Gothrow,
yeah,
Bill Cisco.
yeah,
He didn't work at Oldsmobile, but Jim Schaefer,
okay.
Bob Bryanton,
Yourself.
myself. That's the year we were in Toledo for the national bowling tournament.
Mm-hmm. Now, Wolves was very active in that sort of stuff.
Oh, yeah. But bowling and golf. Yeah. But these four fellows here were all bowling. This is something I'm proud of here. This is my mother,
All right,
and she was 85 years of age. But as I mentioned before, my brother was an instructor at General Motors Institute,
yep,
and my mother was able to get into his office and visit him.
oh, yeah,
She was unable to understand why she couldn't get into my office and visit me.
oh, I see.
So I called Homer Purchase up one day and I said, Homer, my mother would like to get into my office and see where I work. He said, well, why can't she? I said, well, that's what I wondered. He said, can she come now? I said, she could come anytime. He said, come over and get my car and call her up and go get her.
Oh, I'll be darned.
So,
Okay.
so I went over and done Eddie's car. And he notified the fellows at the gates that
Yeah,
Mrs. Irwin was coming in,
Yeah.
to greet her with a smile. Well, when she came in, they were boys there at the business. Hey, how do you do, Mrs. Irwin? How are you? How are you? Took her on out to my office, and I got out there, and who was waiting out there from was George Hector, was his name was?
George Egbert,
Yeah,
yes,
from,
right.
from public relations.
Yeah,
With his camera. So
this was in team then, wasn't it?
well, that was in the team.
Uh-huh. Okay.
And I guess this is one more here.
Okay, this is another retirement group for a dinner or something.
Well, this is a recreation fellows that worked on special parties and stuff of that
All
sort.
right,
Here at Arnold Top.
okay, on the right, with the glasses.
I don't know. Here's that's Walter Campbell, I think, right there.
Okay.
I believe it is.
Recognize very many folks in that picture. What would the purpose have been for this? What kind of?
Well, when we had our golf outings and like that, like we always had to have fellas that pass out the gifts and work the various holes and this and that other things. And when we had our picnics out at Ionian, we had fellas who work out there on the picnic.
Oh, yeah,
and whatever when we had at the girls' golf outings, we had to have fellows who work on the girls' golf outings.
So this is kind of an organizational.
So these are fellows that did that kind of work, you know.
Okay.
So they'd give us a dinner once in a while.
Okay.
And then this was my 50th. Or my retirement.
Your sign-in sheet or your sign-up sheet for the retirement party.
Yeah.
Okay. And then these are pictures that like these around it that were part of the party that night.
Yeah, they give me a railroad hat.
Uh-huh.
Mm.
Okay.
About what? Oh, our youngest daughter and her husband flew up for that from Virginia, from Petersburg, Virginia.
My goodness.
And they didn't let me know.
Surprise.
But they talked to Mr. Carlin. No, was Bob Hosel.
All right.
They talked to Bob Hosel. And he knew all about it.
Uh-huh.
So when they got there, well, he had flowers for my daughter, as well as for Dorothy.
Yeah.
And it was a complete surprise.
Yeah.
This is a little ditty they gave to me. It's kind of faded.
Yeah, I'm not allowed to run the train. The whistle I can't blow. I'm not allowed to say how far the railroad cars can go. I'm not allowed to shoot off steam or even clang the bell, but let it jump the goddamn track, then see who catches hell. Very good. What's this office picture?
Oh, that's an old railroad office. Just how they might look back in those days.
But now, was that given you for a specific purpose?
That was given to me after I was all through.
Okay.
And this is one of the old Chicago and Grand Trunk Railway schedules and like that.
1883.
Yeah.
Wow. Holy Pete. That really is an old one, isn't it?
Down Creek Sanitarium was there at that time.
Isn't that interesting? Yeah. Huh. Wow. Yeah, the Lansing Iron and Engine Works was advertising a steam engine. Oh my goodness, how about that? Oh, that's neat. Oh, that's great, guys. Well, that is excellent.
Well, I could talk and think of things for quite some time, but
Well,
You want to brag about our oldest daughter?
on the tape. Anything else, Don, that you'd like to share on from the Oldsmobile side of the house, so to speak, that comes to mind that we haven't rambled about?
well, I might mention a few things here now. When Mr. Graybo was still the yard master, he used to go way beyond the property line and check cars because he didn't always take the word of the people on the outside.
Was that right?
He wanted to assure himself that these were there or they weren't there and like that.
Really were.
Well, this one day he was out along the Grand Trunk tracks. He found two new Southern Railroad cars, brand new ones, stenciled exactly the same. Now, when I say stenciled the same, the very same car number on each car. And he called Mr. Harmon and told Mr. Harmon about it. Mr. Harmon called the Southern Railroad. They sent a man to Lansing to take a picture of those two cars because they couldn't believe it.
Isn't that something?
But that's an interesting thing that
somebody must have goofed that up when they were painting or something.
He would, Mr. Graybo I'm referring to again, he would even go as far as Saginaw Yard if he felt that there was a car in Lansing that had been reported to him and they were not able to locate it. He would go to Saginaw Yard and check the tracks himself, and sometimes he would find it.
Isn't that interesting?
Well, when I was given the promotion to yardmaster or supervisor of rail operations, Mr. Corwin told me at that time the boundary line was my line.
Oh.
He did not wish to have me out checking the railroad cars on railroad property.
All right.
I adhered to this pretty much, but I broke the rule a few times because even I would find the car now and then that they didn't know where it was. But I didn't do it with just on emergency deals.
Yeah.
Mr. Graybo carried a key to the railroad gates, and I carried a key to the railroad gates. We probably were the only two people that had access to entering and leaving the plant with a key to the gates outside of security, plant protection.
Yeah.
But being able to open these gates it saved us a lot of steps. And also there was times it helped to get the crew into the yard much faster to have the gates open when they first got there instead of their having to take the time to open.
Did anybody ever forget to open a gate?
No, we didn't have that trouble much with the gates. That was pretty well taken care of. One of the things that we did have happen too often, but not real often, the blue flag is the protection for the track while anyone is unloading or loading. That blue flag must be placed in the center of the track ahead of the car.
Okay.
And it must be the responsibility of one person on that track to place that blue flag and remove the blue flag. And that way that they're sure that it'll be handled properly.
That would be like somebody that's running the dock or on the dock that
Right.
loading or unloading.
Right. Now there were times when this blue flag was pulled when it should not have been. There were times that this blue flag was not pulled when it should have been.
Mm.
One example I can give is that Mr. Stump called me and asked me for a quick switch on a load of batteries. I got the railroad lined up for it, called Mr. Stump, and I said, "Are you ready?" He said, "Yes, anytime, we're waiting." They went in there, the blue flag was not on the track, but the dock plate was in one of the cars.
Oh, no.
There was a little office sitting right on the edge of the track. And when they pulled the cars out of there with the dock plate in the car, they pulled the dock plate right along with the car. They ripped that office off that dock, just like you would
Just
blow it
shear
up.
right off. Yeah.
There was one fellow in the little office, and I think he flew out of there, Irving Trudgeon,
Mm-hmm.
but he never was hurt.
Isn't that
But
it?
just they had a door on each end of that
Yeah,
office, thank goodness. And just the second that dock plate hit the office, he flew right out that other door. And he was not injured.
Isn't
But
that
the office was
demolished. Yeah.
completely demolished.
Yeah.
Don Smith, that used to be foreman in the engine plant, loading engines, failed to take care of these dock plates satisfactorily, and he lost his job over it.
I think we tore half the wall out on that one, didn't we?
Well, a lot of damage.
Yeah.
But that blue flag was the security for unloading or loading.
Mm-hmm.
We had a little conversation with Ken Mix at one time that I had to get Bob Strong involved in. Mr. Mix thought that to be really efficient, if they loaded the cars at Building 62 on the west, when they were switching the track, they could keep the men working on the east end while we were switching the track.
Mm-hmm.
I advised Mr. Mix that could not be done. That those boys must be off out of the cars and clear of the track, just in case something should happen. Well, he didn't agree with me, so we got our safety director, Mr. Strong, to come up and explain to Mr. Mix the rules and regulations.
Yeah, that was in the parts warehouse, wasn't it?
Right.
Yeah.
Mr. Mix also was in my Stutterbusters class for Dale Carnegie.
Oh.
He didn't last very long. He refused to do all the things that they taught in Dale Carnegie course. He wasn't going to stand up there with a newspaper and pound the desk.
The table?
No, sir, not Ken Mix. These are just little things that I can think of that are interesting. They called me one morning about 2:30, 3 o'clock from Oldsmobile, and they refused to do any switching at Building 62. I got over there, and there was a blue flag sitting in the middle of the main line right by Pine Street.
Yeah.
I walked all the areas to see why it was there. I could find nothing, absolutely nothing. So I went down in the engineering, by plant engineering, looked over their day book. They had a boom crane there after work at midnight and put some air conditioning equipment up on the roof of the building.
Yeah.
But when they got through doing this, they cleared their part of it out and everything, but they left their blue flag on the track.
Flag way down. Mm-hmm.
So after I lifted the blue flag, we continued with our switching and had the plant set up for the following morning.
Yeah.
But I advised plant engineering the following day that when they did work of that sort, please move the blue flag.
Sure.
But plant protection would never move a blue flag.
Not unless somebody of authority
That's
showed
right.
them what to do.
There were things that I could call plant protection for during the night that they would help me with, but not with a blue flag. They would not.
Mhm.
They would not
Wouldn't
touch,
touch one.
No,
Yeah.
no, they would not touch a blue flag.
Yeah. Well, that's great, Don. I think that's an excellent remembrance of the things kind of the way they were. Somebody will sit down 20, 30 years from now and chuckle about how we used to run our railroad, so to speak.
I would like to finish this in this manner. I appreciate Jim Walkinshaw coming to my home, interviewing me. I thank Oldsmobile for the years that I had there. I have wonderful memories of my work, my fellow employees, people that I enjoyed in golf, bowling, and I think that this museum is a wonderful thing. I surely hope it's a great success.
Thank you, Don.